What if I told you that someone could disappear right in front of your eyes? Not with magic, not with mirrors, but with a martial art so advanced it makes the impossible look effortless. Welcome back to Tales of Wonder. If you enjoy stories that challenge what you think is possible and leave you questioning reality itself, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a tale that'll blow your mind. Now let's begin today's story. Marcus Chen had always been the kind of person who blended into crowds. At 32, he worked as a mid-level accountant at a corporate firm in downtown Seattle, wore unremarkable gray suits, and lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment that overlooked a parking lot. His colleagues barely remembered his name. His neighbors had never seen him coming or going. Even his own reflection in the bathroom mirror each morning seemed to ask, "Who are you, really?" But what nobody knew, what nobody could have possibly guessed, was that Marcus Chen possessed a skill so rare, so impossibly refined, that only a handful of people on Earth could claim to understand it. He was a practitioner of Qinggong, an ancient Chinese martial art focused on lightness, speed, and movement so fluid it appeared supernatural. While most people dismissed Qinggong as legend or movie fantasy, Marcus had spent 23 years mastering it under the guidance of a reclusive master in the mountains of rural China during his childhood and teenage years. By the time he returned to the States for college, Marcus could move across rooftops without making a sound. He could scale walls using the tiniest imperfections as footholds. He could cross a room in the blink of an eye, so quickly that security cameras would catch only a blur. And perhaps most impressively, he could vanish. Not literally, of course, but through a combination of timing, misdirection, and movement so fast that the human eye simply couldn't track it. But Marcus didn't use his abilities for heroics or fame. He didn't wear a mask and fight crime. He didn't post videos online for clicks. Instead, he lived quietly, worked his boring job, and kept his skills hidden. Why? Because his master had taught him one unbreakable rule. True power is most effective when it remains invisible. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Marcus was sitting in his cubicle, reviewing spreadsheets for the quarterly audit, when his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Your sister is in danger. Warehouse District. Pier 9. Come alone. You have 1 hour." Marcus's heart stopped. His sister, Lily, was a journalist who'd been investigating organized crime in the Pacific Northwest for the past 6 months. She'd been digging into a smuggling operation tied to a powerful crime syndicate known as the Red Phoenixes. Marcus had warned her repeatedly to be careful, but Lily was fearless, sometimes recklessly so. He stood up from his desk without a word, grabbed his jacket, and walked calmly toward the elevator. His co-workers barely noticed. Within 3 minutes, he was out of the building. Within 10, he was on a bus heading toward the waterfront. And within 30 minutes, he was standing in the shadow of an abandoned warehouse on Pier 9, studying the building with the trained eye of someone who'd spent years learning to see what others missed. The warehouse was old, rusted, and surrounded by shipping containers stacked like a maze. There were no visible guards, but Marcus could sense them. 3 men positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, trying to look casual, but failing. Their body language screamed amateur. These weren't professional soldiers or trained assassins. They were street-level enforcers, probably armed, but untrained in real combat. Marcus didn't approach the front entrance. Instead, he circled the perimeter silently, his footsteps making no sound on the gravel. He found a side wall with a series of rusted drainage pipes running vertically up the building's exterior. Without hesitation, he leaped upward, his fingers finding purchase on the pipe's brackets, and climbed with the ease of someone ascending a ladder. Within seconds, he was on the roof. The skylight was filthy but intact. Through the grime, Marcus could see into the warehouse below. His heart clenched. Lily was there, tied to a chair in the center of the open floor, her mouth gagged, her eyes wide with fear. Surrounding her were 6 men, all dressed in black jackets with Red Phoenix emblems stitched on the backs. They were laughing, drinking beer, and passing around a handgun like it was a toy. The leader, a tall man with a shaved head and a scar running down his left cheek, stood directly in front of Lily, speaking into his phone. "Yeah, boss," he said, his voice echoing faintly through the skylight. "We got the journalist. She's been asking too many questions. What do you want us to do with her?" There was a pause. "Understood. We'll make it look like an accident." Marcus's jaw tightened. He assessed the situation with clinical precision. 6 armed men. 1 hostage. No civilians nearby. No police in sight. He had maybe 10 minutes before they acted. This was going to require everything he'd learned. Marcus didn't carry weapons. He didn't need them. His body was the weapon, honed through decades of training. He moved to the edge of the skylight, testing its hinges with gentle pressure. Rusted but functional. He could work with that. He closed his eyes and took 3 deep breaths, centering himself. This was the mental state his master had called wuxin. No mind. It was a state of absolute calm, where thought and action became one, where the body moved faster than the brain could process. In this state, Marcus wasn't thinking about what to do next. He simply knew. He opened his eyes, and then he moved. The skylight exploded inward as Marcus dropped through it, but he didn't fall. He descended, controlling his momentum with a grace that defied physics. He landed in a crouch 15 feet below, silent as a shadow, directly behind one of the guards who'd been standing near a stack of crates. The guard didn't even have time to turn around. Marcus's hand shot out, striking a pressure point on a man's neck with surgical precision. The guard collapsed instantly, unconscious before he hit the ground. The other 5 men spun toward the sound, but Marcus was already gone. He moved so fast that their eyes couldn't track him, a blur of motion that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. He used the crates, the shadows, the angles of the warehouse to his advantage, appearing behind another guard and disabling him with a strike to the solar plexus that left the man gasping and crumpling to the floor. "What the hell?" one of the remaining men shouted, raising his gun. But Marcus was already on him. He closed the distance in less than a second, his hand lashing out to redirect the gun's barrel away from Lily. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as Marcus twisted the man's wrist, forcing him to drop the gun, then swept his legs out from under him. The man hit the ground hard, dazed and disoriented. 3 down. 3 to go. The scarred leader was shouting orders now, his voice tinged with panic. "Spread out. Find him. But he never finished the sentence. Marcus appeared directly in front of him. Not from behind, not from his side, but seemingly from nowhere, and delivered a palm strike to the man's chest that sent him stumbling backward, gasping for air. The last 2 guards opened fire, their bullets tearing through the air where Marcus had been standing a fraction of a second earlier. But he was already moving, his body twisting and weaving between the shots with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. He ran up the side of a crate, launched himself into the air, and came down on one of the shooters with both feet, driving the man into the ground with bone-crushing force. The final guard dropped his gun and ran. He made it maybe 10 feet before Marcus appeared in his path, seemingly materializing out of thin air. The guard's eyes went wide with terror. "Please, man, Marcus didn't let him finish. One strike to the nerve cluster in the man's shoulder, and he was down. The entire fight had lasted less than 40 seconds. Marcus walked calmly to Lily, who was staring at him with an expression that was equal parts shock, disbelief, and awe. He untied her hands and removed the gag from her mouth. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What? How?" "We'll talk later," he said quietly, helping her to her feet. "Can you walk?" She nodded, still staring at him like he was a stranger. "Who are you?" Marcus didn't answer. He was already scanning the warehouse for exits. The sound of approaching sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Someone must have heard the gunshots and called the police. That was good. It meant Lily would be safe. But Marcus couldn't be here when the authorities arrived. Questions would be asked. Attention would be drawn. And his master's rule would be broken. "Go to the front entrance," he told Lily, pointing toward the main doors. "The police will be here in 2 minutes. Tell them everything you know about the Red Phoenixes. Give them the evidence you've collected. They'll protect you." "Wait, what about you? I was never here." And with that, Marcus turned and ran. He leaped onto a stack of crates, vaulted up to a support beam, and disappeared through the same skylight he'd entered. By the time Lily blinked, he was gone. The aftermath was chaotic. The police arrived, arrested the 6 unconscious men, and took Lily's statement. Her story, corroborated by the bruises on the attackers and the scattered weapons, made front-page news. The Red Phoenix's smuggling operation was exposed, their leadership arrested, and Lily became a local hero for her investigative journalism. But when asked how she escaped, Lily gave the same answer every time: "I don't know. It happened so fast. One second, I was tied up, and the next, these guys were all on the ground. I think someone helped me, but I never saw who." The detective assigned to the case reviewed the warehouse's security footage, but the cameras had been conveniently disabled before the attack. There were no witnesses, no fingerprints, no evidence that anyone else had been there. It was as if a ghost had intervened. 2 weeks later, Marcus was back at his desk, reviewing spreadsheets and answering emails. His co-workers chatted around him, oblivious. His cubicle neighbor asked him if he'd watched the news about the warehouse rescue. "Yeah," Marcus said with a faint smile. "Crazy story, right? I wonder who saved that journalist. Must have been some kind of vigilante." Marcus just shrugged and returned to his work. That evening, his phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Thank you. I don't know how you did what you did, but thank you. I owe you my life." Marcus typed a reply. "You don't owe me anything. Just stay safe, and maybe be a little more careful next time." He deleted the message thread and set his phone down. His master had been right. True power was most effective when it remained invisible. And sometimes, the greatest victories were the ones no one ever knew about. But Marcus knew, and that was enough. Months passed. Life returned to normal. Marcus continued working his quiet job, living his unremarkable life. But late at night, when the city slept, he would sometimes climb to the roof of his apartment building and practice his forms under the moonlight. Movements so fast and so precise that if anyone had been watching, they would have sworn he was defying the laws of physics. Because that's what Qinggong was. Not magic, not superpowers, just the perfection of human potential pushed to its absolute limit. And Marcus Chen? He was living proof that the impossible was simply the unobserved. One evening, about 6 months after the warehouse incident, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. He was making tea in his kitchen when he heard a soft knock at his door. So soft that most people wouldn't have heard it at all. But Marcus had trained his senses to detect the faintest disturbances. He opened the door to find an elderly man standing in the hallway. The man was small, perhaps 5'4", with deeply weathered skin and eyes that seemed to hold entire lifetimes of wisdom. He wore simple gray robes and carried a wooden walking stick. Marcus's heart stopped. "Sure, Fu," he whispered, using the traditional term for master. The old man smiled gently. "May I come in?" Marcus stepped aside immediately, bowing deeply as his master entered. It had been nearly 15 years since he'd seen Master Lu in person. The old man had stayed in China, living in his mountain monastery, refusing all modern communication. The fact that he was here, in Seattle, was extraordinary. "You broke the rule," Master Lu said softly, settling into Marcus's simple armchair with surprising grace for someone who appeared to be in his 80s. Marcus's throat tightened. "I know. I'm sorry. But my sister..." Master Lu raised a hand, silencing him. "I did not come to scold you, Marcus. I came to tell you something important." He paused, his ancient eyes studying Marcus with an intensity that made him feel like a student again. "Do you know why I taught you to hide your abilities? To remain invisible. To avoid attention." "No." Master Lu shook his head slowly. "That was only part of it. The true reason is this. The world is not ready for people like you. When ordinary people see the impossible, they react with fear, worship, or greed. None of these reactions lead to wisdom. They lead to chaos." Marcus nodded, absorbing the words. "But," Master Lu continued, his voice taking on a different tone, "there are moments when invisibility becomes complicity. Moments when silence becomes betrayal. You faced such a moment when your sister was in danger. And you made the right choice." Marcus looked up in surprise. "I did, yes. Because you acted without ego. You saved a life and disappeared. You did not seek glory or recognition. You simply did what needed to be done. The old man smiled. That is the highest expression of Qinggong. Not the physical skill, but the wisdom to know when to use it. Marcus felt something release in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for months. There is a reason I came to see you, Master Lu said, his tone becoming more serious. The world is changing. There are others like you, practitioners of ancient arts that most believe to be legend. Some use their skills for good. Others do not. I am too old to continue monitoring these situations myself. I need someone younger, someone skilled, someone wise. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What are you asking me to do? I am asking you to become what I once was, a guardian. Not a hero in the public eye, but a protector in the shadows. Someone who intervenes when the impossible threatens the innocent. Someone who uses the ancient ways to preserve balance in the modern world. Marcus sat down slowly, processing the weight of what his master was proposing. It wasn't just about saving his sister. It was about stepping into a larger purpose, a hidden world he'd only glimpsed during his training. How many others are there? He asked quietly. More than you might think, and fewer than the world needs. Master Lu leaned forward. I will not force this path upon you. It is a burden, and it requires sacrifices. You will live between two worlds, normal by day, extraordinary by night. Most people will never know what you do. You will have no fame, no recognition, no reward beyond the knowledge that you made a difference. Marcus thought of his sister, safe because he'd acted. He thought of the 6 men who would have killed her without hesitation. He thought of all the people who might face similar dangers, with no one to help them. When do I start? He asked. Master Lu smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his weathered face. You already have. That night, after his master left, Marcus stood on his apartment rooftop and looked out over the city. Somewhere down there, people were in danger. Somewhere, the impossible was happening in the darkness, unseen and unchallenged. But not anymore. Marcus took a deep breath, centered himself, and began to move. He ran across the rooftop, building speed, then launched himself into the air, his body arcing gracefully across the gap to the next building. He landed silently, rolled forward, and continued running, his movements so fast and so fluid that anyone watching would have seen only a shadow, a blur, a trick of the light. He was a ghost in the machine of the modern world, armed with an ancient art that made the impossible possible. And he was just getting started. 3 years later, a small independent documentary called Urban Legends, The Seattle Phantom, was released online. It featured interviews with dozens of people who claimed to have witnessed impossible rescues. A woman pulled from a burning building by someone who vanished before the firefighters arrived. A mugging victim who swore their attacker was disarmed by a figure that moved faster than their eyes could track. A child who'd wandered onto a busy highway and was suddenly, inexplicably, safe on the sidewalk with no memory of how they got there. The documentary dismissed these stories as urban legends, mass hallucinations, or coordinated hoaxes. But in the comments section, thousands of people shared their own encounters with the Seattle Phantom. They described a figure dressed in dark clothes, moving with impossible speed, intervening in moments of crisis, and then vanishing without a trace. The documentary's creator concluded that the phenomenon was simply people's need to believe in heroes, a modern mythology for anxious times. Marcus watched the documentary in his apartment, a faint smile on his face. Let them think it was a legend. Let them think it was impossible. That's exactly how it should be. Because the greatest magic trick of all wasn't making yourself disappear. It was making people believe you were never there in the first place. And Marcus Chen? He was a master of that particular art. If you possessed an extraordinary ability that could change lives, but required you to remain forever anonymous and unrecognized, would you use it? Or would the burden of invisibility be too great a price to pay? If this story made you question what's possible in the shadows of our everyday world, do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale that'll challenge everything you thought you knew. Until next time, keep wondering, keep questioning, and remember, sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones you never notice. See you in the next video.